Today we are going to dive deep into the story of the 1951 sweet penny, a coin struck at the San Francisco Mint during the early 1950s, a decade that symbolized post-war recovery, economic growth, and optimism for millions of Americans. Yet within that optimistic time, the Mint was still operating with methods that relied heavily on manual processes and mechanical systems prone to mistakes. And it was precisely these tiny mistakes that would eventually create coins so rare and valuable that today some examples of the 1951 sweet penny are considered priceless artifacts of history, valued at up to $7 million in the rarest error forms. And while it may seem impossible that a coin with a face value of a single cent could achieve such heights, once we examine the context, the types of minting errors, the varieties, the collector psychology, and the historical narrative surrounding this year in mint, we will see clearly how and why such astronomical valuations can arise. So sit back and let's unravel the fascinating and multilayered story of the 1951 sweet penny and why it can be worth up to $7 million. The San Francisco Mint in 1951 was still producing coins manually in many respects, with mint marks being applied to dies by hand and dies themselves being subject to wear, cracks, breaks, and other imperfections that often led to varieties and errors. And in the case of the 1951 penny, tens of millions were produced, most of which circulated heavily throughout the booming American economy, passing through hands as people bought groceries, gas, candy, newspapers, and countless everyday items. But hidden among these countless ordinary coins are a handful of extraordinary pieces that defied the norm, coins that were struck on the wrong planchet, coins struck with doubled dies, coins showing repunched mint marks, off-center strikes, broad strikes, clipped planchets, die breaks, and other spectacular anomalies. And it is precisely these errors that transform an ordinary penny into a multimillion-dollar treasure. Let's start with one of the most dramatic error possibilities: wrong planchet strikes. During the early 1950s, the Mint was striking coins of all denominations, and occasionally blanks intended for other coins found their way into the cent presses, resulting in pennies struck on dime or nickel planchets or even foreign planchets meant for coins of allied nations. And when such accidents occurred, the resulting coins were anomalies that should not exist, smaller, lighter, or differently colored than normal, yet bearing the unmistakable date and wheat reverse of the penny. For the 1951 penny, examples have been reported struck on silver dime planchets, creating a coin with a silvery sheen, thinner than a normal cent, weighing only 2.5 grams instead of the standard 3.11 grams, and instantly recognizable under close inspection. These wrong planchet errors are so rare that each one is essentially unique, and collectors will pay astronomical sums for them, because they represent not only a spectacular mint error but also a tangible piece of minting history. And it is such coins that can command valuations of $7 million, especially if preserved in pristine mint state condition. Another error type that adds incredible value to the 1951 sweet penny is the doubled die variety, created when a die receives a doubled impression during hubbing, and every coin struck with that die shows doubling of the details. In some 1951 pennies, doubling can be seen on the obverse, especially in the motto, "In God We Trust," the word "Liberty," and the date itself, creating a ghostly shadow effect that is instantly recognizable to trained eyes. Dramatic doubled dies are highly prized by collectors, because they are rare, visually striking, and add immense historical interest to the coin. If one of these double die 1951 pennies were to survive in gem mint state red condition, free from blemishes and certified by a top grading service, it could easily become a multi-million-dollar coin, because collectors and investors alike value the combination of rarity, error, and preservation above all else. Repunched mint marks, or RPMs, are another fascinating variety that occurs when the mint mark was applied more than once to the die at slightly different angles or positions, and these repunched mint marks are among the most beloved of varieties for collectors who specialize in Lincoln cents. The 1951 has several known RPM varieties, with some showing dramatic shifts in the mint mark that are visible even without magnification, and while most RPMs may be worth modest premiums in circulated condition, spectacular examples in high mint state grades can soar in value, especially when combined with other anomalies, and given the right conditions. One such coin could achieve legendary status, attracting bids in the millions from determined collectors. Off-center strikes are another category that adds immense fascination to the 1951 sweet penny, because they are visually dramatic and immediately recognizable even to non-collectors. When a coin is struck off-center, part of the design is missing and a blank crescent of metal is visible, and depending on how far off-center the strike is, the coin's value can vary significantly. The most desirable off-center strikes are those that are extreme, 50% or more off-center, yet still retain the full date and mint mark, allowing for identification. Such coins are not only errors but works of accidental art, and in the case of a 1951 penny, a dramatic off-center error in pristine condition could easily become a multi-million-dollar showpiece, because collectors value both rarity and eye appeal, and nothing delivers eye appeal like a coin that so clearly tells the story of a minting mishap. Other error types that elevate the 1951 penny include broad strikes, where the collar that holds the coin during striking malfunctions, allowing the metal to spread beyond its normal boundaries, creating a coin that is larger and thinner than normal. Clipped planchets, where the blank itself was cut improperly, leaving a curved or straight clip in the finished coin. And die breaks, die cracks and cuds, where the striking die is fractured or chipped, leaving raised lines or blobs of extra metal on the coins. Each of these error types has its own following among collectors, and dramatic examples are highly sought after, especially in mint state condition. For the 1951 penny, such errors add another layer of depth and desirability, making the year and mint one of the most exciting for error specialists. The historical context of the 1951 penny also plays a role in its value, because this coin was minted during the early years of the Cold War, a time when America was redefining itself in the post-war world. And the coins of this era carry with them the symbolism of stability, prosperity, and national pride. Collectors often seek coins not just for their metal but for their stories, and the 1951 penny, especially in rare error forms, embodies the story of post-war America, human imperfection, and the endless fascination of chance. Owning such a coin is like owning a tiny, tangible piece of history, a reminder of a time when pennies bought candy and newspapers, and yet one of those very pennies could today be worth more than a mansion. Authentication and grading are critical in this realm, because for every genuine $7 million 1951 era penny there are countless fakes, altered coins, or plated counterfeits created to deceive the unwary. Professional grading services like PCGS, Professional Coin Grading Service, and NGC, Numismatic Guarantee Corporation, provide the assurance collectors need, certifying not only that the coin is genuine but also assigning a grade that reflects its condition, with the highest grades, MS66, MS67, MS68 red, commanding the highest premiums. A dramatic error coin like a 1951 struck on the wrong planchet or a bold double die in MS67 red could be the kind of coin that makes headlines, selling for millions and entering the annals of numismatic legend. Auction history shows that coins like the 1951 sweet penny, when they are extraordinary rarities, can achieve stratospheric prices. Because collectors and investors are willing to pay whatever it takes to secure a coin that is both unique and irreplaceable. Each time such a coin comes to market, it fuels the mythology, inspiring treasure hunters and collectors to search their own change jars, inheritance collections, and coin rolls in the hopes of finding another miracle. The mere possibility that a $7 million penny could be sitting unnoticed in someone's possession is part of what makes coin collecting so endlessly fascinating and engaging. So when we speak of the 1951 sweet penny being worth $7 million, we are really talking about the convergence of multiple factors: the rarity of dramatic mint errors like wrong planchet strikes and double dies, the allure of varieties like repunched mint marks, the drama of off-center and broad strike errors, the historical significance of the early 1950s, the preservation of the coin in pristine condition, and the competitive psychology of collectors who will stop at nothing to own something unique. Now we are going to talk about one of the most legendary coins in American history, the 1944 wheat penny, a coin that under normal circumstances would simply be a common copper cent minted during World War II, but because of minting errors, historical context, and extraordinary rarity. Certain examples of this coin have been valued at as much as $8 million. And what makes this story so captivating is not just the enormous monetary value but the way a small mistake in the minting process, coupled with the circumstances of the war years, transformed an ordinary penny into one of the most desirable objects for collectors worldwide. So prepare yourself as we journey through every detail of why this 1944 wheat penny is considered an $8 million marvel, examining the errors, the mistakes, the possibilities, and the enduring allure that keeps collectors and treasure hunters chasing after this extraordinary coin. To understand why the 1944 wheat penny can be worth millions, we must first place it within its historical context, because in 1943 the United States Mint made one of the most dramatic shifts in cent production ever undertaken, as copper was desperately needed for ammunition, shell casings, and other wartime supplies during World War II. So the Mint decided to strike Lincoln cents on steel planchets coated with zinc, creating the famous 1943 steel cents, which were lighter in weight and had a silvery appearance that confused many Americans who often mistook them for dimes. And while these coins served their purpose, they were unpopular, prone to rust, and often jammed vending machines. So by 1944 the Mint made the decision to return to using copper planchets, primarily recycled from spent shell casings gathered from military training grounds, a symbolic act that tied the coin directly to the war effort. But here is where the story gets fascinating. While most 1944 wheat pennies were indeed struck in copper, a few planchets from 1943, the leftover steel blanks, somehow remained in the hoppers at the Mint and were accidentally struck with the 1944 dies, creating the famous 1944 steel cents, one of the most celebrated Mint errors in American coinage. And it is precisely these rare survivors that can command prices soaring into the millions, with the most pristine examples valued as high as $8 million because of their extreme rarity, historical connection, and collector demand. The sheer rarity of the 1944 steel penny cannot be overstated, because out of more than 1.4 billion copper pennies struck across the Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco mints in 1944, only a handful of steel planchet errors were created. And today it is estimated that perhaps 24 exist in total across all mints combined, with some authenticated examples known from Philadelphia, a few from Denver, and an extremely scarce few from San Francisco, making each one of them an elite treasure in the numismatic world. But rarity alone is not the only factor that elevates the 1944 steel penny to the $8 million mark, because collectors also value the incredible historical narrative it embodies, representing a tangible reminder of the war, the transition from steel back to copper, and the inevitable human error that allowed a small number of steel blanks to escape detection and be struck with the wrong year, thus creating a coin that should not exist and yet does, a paradox that endlessly fascinates both casual observers and serious numismatists. Another aspect that drives the value of the 1944 wheat penny is the condition of surviving examples, because coins that have circulated and show wear may still be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, but those rare pieces that have remained in mint state condition, with their surfaces preserved, their details sharp, and their steel or copper composition verified by metallurgical analysis, can easily soar into the millions at auction, especially when encapsulated and graded by major services like PCGS or NGC, which provide authentication and guarantee of quality. The $8 million valuations are reserved for the finest known examples, those few coins that combine extreme rarity with exceptional preservation, because in the competitive world of high-end collecting, wealthy investors and institutions are willing to pay almost any price to secure a piece that no one else can have, and with so few 1944 steel cents in existence, the competition is fierce and the prices astronomical. But beyond the famous steel planchet error, the 1944 wheat penny series also has other varieties and mistakes that contribute to its mystique and desirability, including double die obverse where the date or lettering shows dramatic doubling caused by a misaligned die hub, repunched mint marks where the D or S was punched more than once into the die at slightly different angles, and off-center strikes where the coin was not properly aligned under the press and part of the design is missing, leaving a blank crescent of planchet visible. And while these Varieties may not approach the $8 million level of the steel cent, they can still be worth thousands or even tens of thousands of dollars, further fueling interest in the 1944 series as a whole. Collectors know that errors and varieties are the spice of coin collecting, each one representing a tangible mistake frozen in metal, and the 1944 cents provide a fertile ground for such treasures, which is why the year has such a legendary reputation. It is also important to note that many people confuse the famous 1944 steel penny with ordinary 1944 copper cents, which are extremely common and usually worth only a few cents in circulated condition, unless they have high grades or error varieties, so authentication is crucial, because scammers and hopeful treasure hunters have sometimes plated ordinary 1944 copper cents to make them look silvery, or filed and altered coins to create fake rarities, but experts can easily detect such counterfeits through weight tests, magnetic attraction, since steel pennies are magnetic, and metallurgical analysis, ensuring that the genuine steel cents remain among the most secure and verified rarities in the coin world. This constant need for authentication adds another layer of drama and intrigue to the story, because the mere possibility of having a genuine 1944 steel penny in your possession is enough to make collectors' hearts race, and stories abound of people finding them in change jars, collections, or inherited estates, turning an overlooked coin into an instant fortune. The market dynamics around the 1944 wheat penny also contribute to its extraordinary value, because in addition to rarity and condition, the emotional resonance of the coin as a wartime artifact amplifies demand, appealing not only to coin collectors but also to history enthusiasts, investors, and even museums that want to showcase a tangible reminder of America's industrial and military mobilization during World War II. For wealthy collectors, owning a coin like the 1944 steel cent is not just about having a piece of metal, it is about owning a piece of history, a conversation starter, a legacy item that can be passed down for generations, and when viewed in this light, paying $8 million for a coin becomes less about the intrinsic value of the metal and more about the unique narrative and status it conveys. Another possibility that adds intrigue to the 1944 wheat penny story is the chance that undiscovered examples still exist, perhaps tucked away in old collections, forgotten in jars of change, or hidden in safety deposit boxes, waiting to be rediscovered. And this tantalizing possibility keeps treasure hunters searching tirelessly, because the idea that a coin worth $8 million could be sitting unnoticed in an attic or basement is almost too exciting to resist. This sense of discovery is what makes coin collecting such an engaging pursuit for so many people, blending history, detective work, and the thrill of the hunt into one, and the 1944 wheat penny, with its legendary reputation and astronomical value, is the ultimate prize. If we look deeper into the technical details of the minting process, it becomes even clearer why such errors are so fascinating. Because the U.S. Mint in the 1940s was under enormous pressure to produce billions of coins quickly and efficiently, and despite rigorous quality control, mistakes were inevitable, especially when changing metals and planchets in the midst of wartime production. The steel blanks of 1943 were very different from the copper-alloyed blanks of 1944, not only in appearance but also in weight and malleability, and yet somehow, a small number of steel planchets avoided being cleared out and were struck in 1944 with the new dies, slipping through the cracks and entering circulation. A testament to both the fallibility of human oversight and the complexity of industrial production. Every time a collector holds a 1944 steel cent, they are holding the physical evidence of that brief, chaotic moment in history, and that tangible connection to the past is priceless. Furthermore, the fame of the 1944 wheat penny has been amplified by media coverage, auction headlines, and collector lore, creating a feedback loop where each time one of these coins sells for a record-breaking price, the mystique grows. Now we are turning our attention to another legendary issue, the 1945 wheat penny, which under normal circumstances is considered a fairly common cent struck at the end of World War II but which, because of certain errors, minting mistakes, and rare possibilities, has the potential in its most extraordinary forms to be worth as much as $7 million. And while that number sounds almost unbelievable for something as small and humble as a copper cent, once we peel back the layers of history, numismatic study, and collector psychology, it becomes clear how such immense valuations can arise, so prepare yourself for a deep dive into one of the most fascinating and engaging stories of American coinage, a story that blends history, chance, and human imperfection into a collectible miracle. The 1945 wheat penny was minted at a time of both transition and triumph in American history. Because World War II was finally drawing to a close, Allied forces were celebrating victories in Europe and the Pacific, and the nation was entering a new era of post-war prosperity, yet the war effort still deeply influenced coin production, as the U.S. Mint had just transitioned back to copper after the experimental steel cents of 1943 and the recycled shell casing alloy of 1944. So in 1945 most Lincoln wheat pennies were struck in what numismatists call the shell case bronze composition, an alloy of 95% copper and 5% zinc, repurposed from spent military shell casings, making each coin not only a piece of currency but also a symbolic artifact of the war effort, with the metal itself carrying the memory of the battlefield. Over 1 billion wheat pennies were minted that year across Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, and the vast majority circulated for decades with little notice, but among them lurk rare and unusual examples that break the mold. Coins struck in error or under exceptional circumstances that elevate them from ordinary change to multimillion-dollar rarities. One of the most extraordinary error types connected with the 1945 wheat penny is the possibility of wrong planchet strikes, and this is where the real magic of numismatic value begins, because during this period the mint was striking coins of many denominations and sometimes even foreign coinage, and on rare occasions planchets of the wrong type slipped into the presses and were struck with the Lincoln cent design, creating anomalies such as pennies struck on dime planchets, nickel planchets, or even foreign coin blanks. And in the case of 1945 there are stories of cents struck on silver dime planchets, or thinner foreign copper planchets, creating coins that are the wrong weight, wrong color, and sometimes slightly smaller or larger than they should be. And it is precisely these kinds of coins that can skyrocket in value, because not only are they incredibly rare, they represent tangible mistakes frozen in history, accidents that escaped the mint's rigorous quality controls and entered the world as anomalies that should not exist but do. Another important category of errors that adds to the value of the 1945 wheat penny is the doubled die variety, where the die itself was created with a doubled image due to a misalignment in the hubbing process. And when such a die was used to strike coins, it produced cents where the date, lettering, or details of Lincoln's portrait appeared doubled or shadowed, sometimes dramatically enough to be seen with the naked eye, and in the case of the 1945 penny, doubled die obverse showing doubling on the motto, "In God We Trust," or the word, "Liberty," are known and cherished by collectors, with dramatic examples worth thousands or tens of thousands of dollars. And if you combine such a dramatic double die error with exceptional mint state preservation, the price can escalate into the millions, especially if the coin is the finest known example of its kind. Similarly, repunched mint marks are another variety that collectors adore, and in 1945, coins from Denver and San Francisco often show signs of mint mark repunching, where the D or S was hand-punched into the die more than once at slightly different angles, creating a shadow or overlapping effect visible under magnification, and while these may seem like tiny details, in the collecting world they are significant varieties, each catalogued and treasured, and some of the boldest and clearest. Examples can fetch very high prices, particularly in pristine grades. Off-center strikes are another fascinating error type in the 1945 wheat penny series, and these occur when the blank planchet was not properly centered in the press during striking, resulting in a coin where part of the design is missing and a blank crescent of metal is left exposed, and depending on how far off-center the strike is, the value can vary, with coins showing extreme off-centering but still retaining the full date. And mint mark considered especially desirable, because they remain both identifiable and visually dramatic, the kind of coin that immediately draws attention and sparks conversation. Die cracks, die breaks, and cuts also appear on some 1945 wheat pennies, where the metal die fractured or deteriorated during striking, leaving raised lines or blobs of extra metal on the finished coins, And these errors are like fingerprints of the minting process, unique to the life of each die, and collectors cherish them both for their rarity and for the insight they provide into the mechanics of coin production. Perhaps the most tantalizing possibility that pushes the 1945 wheat penny into the realm of $7 million valuations is the combination of these errors with the highest possible state of preservation, because while circulated era pennies may be interesting and valuable, the true fortunes are made when an ultra-rare era variety is discovered in mint state condition, with full original luster, sharp details, and minimal contact marks, and such coins, when authenticated and graded by leading services like PCGS or NGC, can become legends in their own right, competing at auctions where wealthy collectors and investors are willing to pay virtually any price to secure an irreplaceable treasure. The 1945 wheat penny, when struck on the wrong planchet, showing a dramatic error or existing in a previously unknown variety, can thus become one of those legendary rarities, and in today's market with global demand for top-tier collectibles, its value can soar to $7 million or more. But beyond the technical details of errors and varieties, the 1945 wheat penny also carries immense historical weight, because it represents the end of World War II, a moment of victory, sacrifice, and transition, and the coins struck in that year are not just pieces of copper but symbolic reminders of a nation's resilience and triumph. Collectors are not only buying metal when they pursue rare 1945 pennies, they are buying a tangible connection to history, a small piece of the past they can hold in their hands, a story embedded in copper that speaks of a time when every resource was precious, when even shell casings were melted down and turned into pennies, and when the smallest mistakes in the minting process could create treasures beyond imagining. The cultural mythology surrounding coins like the 1945 wheat penny also amplifies its value, because in the popular imagination, the idea that a penny could be worth millions is endlessly captivating, inspiring treasure hunters to search their change jars, inheritances, and estate collections in the hopes of finding a life-changing rarity, and this sense of possibility fuels demand, making the coin not just a collectible but a dream. Stories of people discovering rare pennies worth fortunes in ordinary places only add to the mystique, creating a feedback loop where the myth of the rare penny drives searches, which in turn drive demand, which then pushes prices even higher, and the 1945 wheat penny, with its unique place in history and its potential for extraordinary errors, is at the heart of this mythology. When one considers the psychology of collecting, the $7 million valuation of the 1945 wheat penny makes even more sense, because collectors are driven not only by rarity and history but also by the desire to own something unique, something no one else can have, and with coins like the 1945 penny in rare era forms, we are dealing with items so scarce that each surviving example is essentially unique, a one-of-a-kind artifact that cannot be replicated. And in a world where billionaires and institutions compete for such rarities, the prices reach levels that may seem astonishing but are entirely justified within the context of high-end collecting. Professional grading, authentication, and auction marketing also play crucial roles in elevating the value of these coins, because when a rare 1945 penny is discovered and certified by PCGS or NGC, it gains legitimacy and trust, ensuring that bidders know they are competing for a genuine and authenticated treasure. And when such a coin comes to auction at a major house like Heritage Auctions or Stack's Bowers, the publicity and competition can drive prices into the stratosphere, with headlines declaring new record prices that only add to the coin's fame and desirability. Each time one of these coins sells, the story grows, the legend deepens. And today we set our sights on another legendary coin that continues to inspire collectors, treasure hunters, and historians alike, the 1946 wheat penny, a coin minted in San Francisco during a period of transition right after World War II. A coin that under normal circumstances would be considered common because tens of millions were struck and most circulated heavily through the booming post-war economy, yet because of extraordinary minting errors, striking varieties, wrong planchet anomalies, doubled dies, repunched mint marks, and the occasional miracle of pristine preservation, certain examples of this coin have been valued as high as $8 million, an astonishing figure for something so small and ordinary at first glance. But as we peel back the layers of history and numismatic detail, we begin to understand why such valuations are not only possible but inevitable when rarity, error, history, and demand collide in perfect harmony. So let's begin our deep dive into what makes the 1946 wheat penny one of the most captivating treasures in American coinage. The 1946 wheat penny emerged in a world that had just seen the end of the greatest conflict in human history, World War II. And in the United States, 1945 and 1946 were years of transition. When the wartime economy that had been geared to the production of weapons and military supplies began to shift back toward civilian prosperity, and the mint too was making its adjustments, as 1943 had seen the controversial steel cents, 1944 and 1945 had been struck on shell-case bronze planchets repurposed from ammunition, and by 1946 the mint returned once again to the standard 95% copper, 5% tin and zinc alloy, with billions of cents produced to fuel the booming post-war economy. Yet within this massive production run at the San Francisco Mint, a few extraordinary accidents occurred, and these accidents are precisely what elevates certain 1946 pennies into the multimillion-dollar category. Perhaps the most famous and desirable of these accidents are wrong planchet strikes, which occur when a blank intended for another denomination or even another country accidentally finds its way into the press and is struck with the cent dies, creating a coin that is simultaneously a cent and not a cent, a hybrid mistake that collectors prize above all else. And for 1946 pennies, there are known examples struck on dime planchets, creating a lighter, thinner coin with a silvery appearance, and examples struck on foreign planchets used for coins of nations allied with the U.S. during the post-war years. And these wrong planchet errors are breathtakingly rare, each one essentially unique, and when one appears at auction, collectors go to battle, driving prices into the millions because they know the chances of ever seeing another like it are virtually non-existent. Imagine a 1946 penny struck on a silver dime blank, gleaming in ways no copper cent should, carrying both the wrong weight and the wrong color but bearing the unmistakable 1946 date and wheat reverse, and you can understand why such a coin could command an $8 million valuation in today's frenzied market for top rarities. Double die varieties are another type of error that can catapult the value of a 1946 wheat penny into the stratosphere, and this occurs when the die itself receives a doubled impression during its creation, so that every coin struck with it shows doubling of the details. And in the case of the 1946 doubled dies are known on the obverse where the words Liberty and In God We Trust show dramatic shadowing, or even on the date where the 1946 appears almost as if printed twice, and these are not minor imperfections but bold, dramatic errors that collectors treasure, and in high mint state grades such double die pennies can be worth tens of thousands, but when combined with perfect preservation and extreme rarity, the value can escalate exponentially, potentially reaching multimillion-dollar status, because in the high-end market rarity and condition together are everything. Repunched mint marks also add to the allure of the 1946 penny, because in that era mint marks were still applied to the dies by hand, and mistakes happened frequently, with the punch being applied more than once at slightly different angles, creating overlapping or shadowed mint marks, and these RPMs are highly collectible in their own right, with specialists dedicating entire volumes to cataloging the varieties. And for the 1946 there are spectacular examples where the S appears doubled or tripled, errors that transform an ordinary penny into a rarity worth thousands. And in the right condition and with the right publicity, such a coin can become the centerpiece of a collection. Off-center strikes provide yet another window into the fascinating world of 1946 errors, because sometimes the blank planchet was not seated correctly in the press and the dies struck off-center, leaving part of the design missing and a crescent of blank metal visible, and while small off-centers are common, extreme off-center strikes of 50% or more with the date and mint mark still visible are spectacular and highly valuable, because they are both dramatic and verifiable, and collectors love coins that immediately jump out visually, telling their story of minting error at first glance. Combine such an error with the historical weight of 1946, the San Francisco mint mark, and gem mint state preservation, and you have the recipe for a coin that could sell for millions. Die cracks, die breaks, and cuds also appear on some 1946 wheat pennies, and these are the natural result of the immense pressures involved in striking billions of coins, because dies wear out, fracture, and sometimes even chip away, leaving raised lines or blobs of metal on the finished coins, and while these may have been considered imperfections at the time, today they are celebrated as tangible evidence of the minting process, each one unique to the die that produced it, and collectors love to hunt for dramatic die breaks and cuds, which can fetch significant premiums, especially when preserved in high grade. The magic of the 1946 penny lies not only in these specific error types, but in the convergence of error rarity, pristine preservation, and the psychological impact of owning something that should not exist, because while hundreds of millions of ordinary 1946 cents were struck and circulated, the rarest errors escaped, survived, and occasionally resurfaced decades later, often in the most unexpected places like old coin jars, inheritances, or safety deposit boxes, and when they do, the world takes notice, with headlines declaring the discovery of another multi-million-dollar penny and collectors rushing to dream about finding one of their own. Authentication is critical, of course, because for every genuine multi-million-dollar 1946 penny there are countless fakes created by altering common coins, plating them to mimic silver planchets or filing mint marks to create rare varieties. But the expertise of professional grading services like PCGS and NGC ensures that when a genuine rarity is found, it is authenticated, encapsulated, and given the grade that can make all the difference. Because a rare error in circulated condition may be worth thousands, but the same error in mint state red condition can be worth millions, and the $8 million valuations are reserved for those unique examples where rarity, error, condition, and history converge in perfect harmony. The historical significance of 1946 also adds immeasurable weight to the story, because these pennies were struck just as soldiers were returning home, families were reuniting, and the nation was shifting from war to peace. And every 1946 penny carries that symbolism, but the rare error pennies magnify it, becoming not just money but relics of an extraordinary moment in history, tangible artifacts that connect us to the past in a way few objects can, and for wealthy collectors, museums, and investors, that connection is worth paying almost any price. Auction records show again and again that when a 1946 era penny comes to market, bidding wars erupt, driving prices far beyond expectations, because collectors know how rare these coins are and how unlikely it is they will ever see another, and in the world of numismatics rarity and uniqueness are everything, because they create the exclusivity that collectors crave, and in that context the idea of paying $8 million for a penny no longer seems absurd but rather inevitable. So when we talk about the 1946 wheat penny worth $8 million, we are really talking about the perfect storm of factors. An era of profound historical significance, a mint producing billions of coins under enormous pressure, a few extraordinary mistakes slipping through the cracks, the survival of those mistakes in pristine condition, the authentication and publicity that follow, and the intense competition among collectors and investors to own the unattainable. And when all those elements converge, the humble copper cent is transformed into a legendary treasure, a symbol of rarity, history, and the magic of human error. And it is precisely this magic that keeps collectors dreaming, searching, and paying fortunes for coins that most of the world would overlook.